Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 365 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where, man, after I don't know how many episodes, a dozen or so, we're finally leaving Rohan behind. But for now, it's actually time to take a break from our study of the appendices and do a little bit of live Q&A.
Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm Sara, the Shieldmaiden of Rohan, and I'm here with the man of the West, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sara. Folks, join us as we welcome a few of our patrons to join us for our 30th quarterly Questions After Nightfall. 30.
You know, Alan, I have to say, just let me say this. You look remarkably good considering how long this has been going on for.
Wow! Damning with faint praise, as they say. Thank you, Sara.
Oh, you're so welcome. Anyway, no matter how you got here, you're all welcome here in the common room. Here at the Prancing Pony podcast, we are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth with plenty of speculation and some really bad jokes along the way.
Plenty. We do love our deep dives into the lore, though, and we also really enjoy discussing our favorite themes and just a lot of things. But once a quarter, we take a break from our read-through, and we welcome a few of our patrons to join us here in the common room and bring along some of their very best questions, or at least, hopefully, their best questions.
Terrifyingly, we have absolutely no idea what they're going to ask us. So have we done so many times before, we're simply going to do the best job we can in answering their questions with whatever we have on our shelves and our all too limited brains.
Mm-hmm. Now, as with our previous Questions After Nightfall episodes, all 29 of them before, aside from any possible edits for things like nervous coughs or time spent flipping through pages while we look for an answer, we will be presenting this as it was recorded live. So everything that you hear in this show will have been recorded during this session.
So if you'd like to be on one of these with us sometime, join the Fellowship of the Podcast at patreon.com/prancingponypod. Questions After Nightfall episodes are recorded once a quarter, and patrons at the Elrond's Honorarium tier and higher are invited to join.
It's just one of the ways that we show our appreciation to those who support the show, giving them the opportunity to join us, make us laugh, make us think, make us look stuff up and make us look stupid, and occasionally embarrass us in the best possible way. Now, let's go ahead and get started. Sara, who is up first this time?
It's the delightful Demay.
Oh, Demay, welcome. Welcome back, I should say.
Hello, it's good to be here from rainy Rome. I am going to go to the Wayback Machine. The way back machine. Episode 2.
Goodness.
And I was listening to that one again, and you were, the title of the episode is The Myth Lover, and what you were doing was exploring Tolkien's Mythopoeia, and it started off with some information about Lewis, his dear friend, referred to myth as they are lies even though breathed through silver. And then Tolkien responded with this poem. And Tolkien states, even though they, meaning the myths, contain error, they will also reflect a splintered fragment of the true light. Okay, with that as the basis of this, we're going to talk about physics. And Alan's physics, which is something that I've never agreed with Alan on, so therefore this is my chance. And it has to do with Legolas's ability to see past the curvature of the earth. Are physics even needed whenever we are dealing with something that is a fragment of the true light? And can we abandon the courses mathematical, in quotes, and believe in the power of myth here so that Legolas can see past the curvature of the earth, being as he is an elf, and elves were from the flat land, the flat earth, and so therefore there's no curvature to worry about. And so anyway, that's my question. Can we leave the mathematics behind and see if we can agree that Legolas can see past the curvature of the earth?
How are the wheels of the bus feeling across your body there, Alan?
Oh, wow. All right, Sara, so who's first up today?
Oh, that would be you, love.
We have a question on the table? I'm so sorry, what?
Nice stalling.
Yeah. Well, okay, I get the point. The point is, of course, this is, as she said, a splinter of the light. This is not a representative of actual reality. I, of course, like the more grounded aspects of it. I find the things in Tolkien that are more realistic to be the more believable things. It's all about that secondary belief rather than a suspension of disbelief, as it were. And I think for me, at least, and I know it's a personal thing. It's just how we all read it. But for me, I find that imagining Legolas to be able to see, because light is still light, around the curvature of the earth as being something that for me would require the suspension of disbelief rather than a secondary belief. And again, because there's no, hard answer here, I am probably not going to be able to put that down. But I love that people can read that way and be like, all right, you know what? I'm going to believe that Legolas can see around the curvature of the earth. That's totally fine. I mean, we've talked about this before. It was like with Boromir's horn. We did a little calculation that if Boromir's horn was actually being able to be heard physically in Minas Tirith due to the vibration of air and the sound waves traveling that far, A, it would have taken a really, really long time. B, it would have disintegrated every orc to their component molecules. Just absolutely blown them to shreds. So, we can't obviously put everything through a hardcore scientific rigor when it comes to Tolkien or when it comes to fantasy in general, really. It comes down to that distinction between suspension of disbelief and secondary belief. What about you, Sara? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm a lit prof, so suspension of disbelief is my bread and butter, right? And I am totally okay with that.
Yeah.
I find that, not to utterly disagree with you, Alan, but I utterly disagree with you. Because I like a little myth in my payer, right? Mm-hmm. I enjoy the idea of hand waving some things because it expands the universe that we are looking through. I am okay with the idea of it not being so much reality as verisimilitude, right? There are resonances of reality within this story. And that's okay, but it doesn't need to be all real for me. In fact, I love the mythic quality of it. For me, the idea that an elf can see past the curvature of the earth is perfectly fine. One, because when the elves were first born, the earth was not curved at all. Two, there is no straight road anymore for anyone else, but the elves can leave Middle-earth and go to Valinor. And if they can see that path, then they can see around the curvature of the earth as well, because they're special. And this is
good. They are special. I won't deny
exactly.
that. They're able to travel through Ilmen to get to the Undying Lands, right? Through space, essentially.
Exactly. Yes.
So if they could do that, they can do a lot of things.
Yeah, I get what you're saying about Boromir's horn. Absolutely. And also I've very much enjoyed people doing the calculations about, the beacons being lit and how long that would actually take and all that kind of thing. All that is lovely.
Yeah.
But, it's story. It is myth. It is glorious in the way in which it tells that story. And I personally don't always want to be brought back clunk to earth by someone saying that the physics of this doesn't work, because my response is usually, I don't care.
And truth be told, that is actually where I don't care. If somebody wants to think that, that's totally fine. This isn't Balrog wings. I'm not dying on this hill.
That's different. Okay? I would die on that hill.
I just want to make sure. I'm dying on the Balrog wings hill. I'm dying on the Fëanor's not a good guy hill. But I'm not going to die on the Legolas around the curvature of the earth hill.
That's fair enough.
I think for me, when I read it, and keep in mind that, Demay, you brought up episode 2, which takes me way back. Takes me back 9 years, more than 9 years, actually.
Yeah. Alan's hair was all still dark brown.
It really was, because my kids were still very young. We had just in episode 1, the episode before that in our launch episode, talked about on fairy stories. And one of the things that Tolkien talks about there is that distinction between the willing suspension of disbelief, which is a perfectly credible thing to do, and the reality that you build when you're a sub-creator. And he talks about that you believe it while you are, as it were, inside, talking about the things that happen accord with the laws of that world. The moment disbelief arises, the spell is broken. The magic, or rather art, has failed. And then you're outside looking at the secondary world from that primary world. And I can see how talking about the physics and sort of making it a thing can make it to where some people get popped out of that secondary world and are now having to look down in the primary world from the outside. And for me, it's just the other way around. If Tolkien had written that they are able to see this way because of X, Y, or Z, then I would see this successful subcreation, and I would then be able to remain within that secondary belief or that secondary world. So that's just where it comes down to for me. But I love the idea. And like you said, it's not a hill I'm dying on. I love that people can imagine things differently than me and aren't quite as left-brained, shall we say, and very, spreadsheet driven as I might sometimes be.
Yeah, but it's what you were saying about how it actually does adhere to the rules of that world. Mm-hmm. It doesn't adhere to the rules of our world, but it adheres to the rules of Tolkien's subcreation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I have no problem with, I don't even think about it twice, about elves traversing Ilmen, which the story tells us that flesh unaided cannot survive, right? It's a vacuum, it's space. But because he says they can do this, then therefore they can do this. Mm-hmm. So anyway. Mm-hmm.
I think Sarah wants to add something in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I was just thinking, I know you said before that there were things that were built long time ago, like when the Númenóreans first came over, that men of this time, humans of this time, then are not able to build now.
Right. So
as somebody whose training is in physics, I love the little physics asides about, figuring things out and Boromir's horn, like blowing things up. But I also love the idea that there were things that were able to be done in the past that we don't have access to now. That there is that myth quality. And I like to think that we just don't understand elf eyes. Just a thought.
Okay. That's totally fair. Yeah, I mean, that brings up the whole idea of Eld ente Yewerk, right? The old work of giants, the ancient work of giants. And that's actually I'm thinking in some other fictional universes where that's a thing. The idea that this thing that was made in the past is so great and so fantastic, and we've lost the ability to do that today. That's like central to Warhammer 40,000, right? Everything's built off these templates that, the standard template construction. I'm getting really deep aside if I start getting into that. So rein me in, Sara. But the idea is that there's all these things that we were once able to do that we can't do now. It's a wonderful element to the story. It does add a tremendous mythic characteristic to it. And it works for those things like Orthanc, right? The Argonath, even the city of Minas Tirith itself. I mean, yeah, they're able to rebuild the gate with the help of the dwarves, but if they'd managed to destroy that wall, the wall that's black, it actually on that is made out of the same stuff that Orthanc is made out of, which is probably some sort of volcanic rock. I don't know if they would have been able to reproduce that. You see Legolas and Gimli walking around, and Gimli observes there's some great stonework, and Legolas says something about, yes, but the better stonework is the older. And there's really that observation that as the society advances, those skills, those abilities, those powers actually reduce. So yeah, I like that. I can certainly buy that as a hook to hang the belief of seeing around the curvature of the earth on. That we as men in the seventh age or whatever age we're supposedly in now are unable to understand or comprehend what the elves of the first, second, and third age, well, not first age because the earth wasn't spherical at that point, but of the second half of the second age and third age could do. So yeah, I like that. And I love that you brought in the idea of Eld ente Yewerk. The ancient work of giants is so key to what we see in Tolkien. We see it a lot, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. What a great question, Demay.
Yeah, thank you, Demay. Kind of. All right, Sara, who do we have up next?
Next is Olivia.
Olivia, welcome.
Hi. I've had this question since I first read Lord of the Rings when I was, 13. So Gimli, Paths of the Dead. Aside from the narrative device which is necessary, which I know you and Alan have talked about in previous episodes of the PPP, why is Gimli so terrified of the dead when the men, okay, they've got Aragorn, but the men who would naturally be completely terrified by their own kind just seem to kind of walk through it? And let aside Legolas, who obviously hasn't got a problem with any of this, but why is Gimli so terrified?
That is an interesting question. To look at that, I was thinking originally to look at the passing of the Grey Company. Of course, that's when Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and the Rangers go into the paths of the dead. But we don't really get a lot through that of Gimli's fear. I mean, we see that it's there, right? I mean, he's absolutely terrified. And I think the fact that we see that chapter through his perspective is simply because of the narrative technique that Tolkien uses a lot, which is to put us in the shoes of the least knowledgeable character, right? That's why it's so often Sam, poor guy. It's usually Sam, but when it's not, in this case, Gimli's going to be the one. But what I want to look at is Gimli's response, and this is what I think Olivia was alluding to here, was his absolute terror. So in the chapter, The Last Debate, they're all sort of talking about, what's happened and what they're going to be doing. And in this case, Pippin wants to know about this strange journey that he and Legolas has mentioned, a dozen times already this morning. Gimli says, "The sun may shine here, but there are memories of that road that I do not wish to recall out of the darkness. Had I known what was before me, I think not for any friendship would I have taken the paths of the dead." "The paths of the dead," said Pippin. "I heard Aragorn say that, and I wondered what he could mean. Won't you tell us some more?" "Not willingly, for upon that road I was put to shame. Gimli, Glóin's son, who had deemed himself more tough than men and hardier under earth than any elf. But neither did I prove, and I was held to the road only by the will of Aragorn." And Legolas goes on to say, but also for the love of Aragorn. And he still, even at the end of all that, Gimli's like, "I'm not going to talk about that journey." Now, we know that he was terrified. We know that Legolas was not terrified, because Legolas says, "I felt not the horror. I feared not the shadows of men, powerless and frail as I deemed them." Okay, you go, Legolas. Clearly ghost stories aren't going to spook you. But the question then is, why perhaps was Gimli so afraid when the men were not, when the Rangers were not? I think with Aragorn, it wasn't so much a lack of fear, but an understanding that he had the authority. So even though there may have been fear, he knew he had the power, the right authority, the just authority to command the dead. But I'm trying to see if there's a passage about the fear of the riders, the fear of the Rangers themselves. Before I do, Erwin's got something to throw in here. Erwin.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that in Tolkien's Legendarium, the elves are very specifically one of the designated children of Ilúvatar, as are men. And the dwarves are obviously created by Aule. In my perspective, elves are omnipotent. They know everything, so to say. So they're quite comfortable with ghosts or spirits, if I put it like that. And men
that makes sense.
Are quite used to elves being the
sort of the ideal, the thing to strive
elite.
To be.
Yeah, exactly. And dwarves are very seclusive, and they think they know all. But now they come to a point where, at least then of Gimli, he comes to have to battle with sprites, with ghosts, while usually dwarves battle then dragons and orcs and very physical things. But they have never battled ghosts. And although obviously the Dunedain, who are part of the group, are also a more elite status, they also trust Aragorn, but they also are very acceptant of that there are different things and people who know better.
They're also even willing, they accept that there may be a bad thing on the other side of these doors. I mean, I'm thinking of Halbarad, who says, "This is an evil door and my death lies beyond it." And he's right, it does. Yeah. And then he says, "I will dare to pass it nonetheless." So there's something in these men who follow Aragorn that Gimli just doesn't have yet. And that's sort of the way I want to look at this. Like, if Gimli were to follow Aragorn for another 10 years, I wonder if he would feel as much fear. Like, Aragorn's such a leader. He's such, I mean, if he's able to hold the men of the Grey Company to this sort of loyalty and this sort of commitment, I think it's just would be a matter of time that Gimli would be able to follow that leadership. But Erwin, I think you're onto something about the children of Ilúvatar. Maybe it's fair to say, and Sara, I want to get your thoughts on this, because elves and men are sort of the natural born children of Ilúvatar, is there something extra or maybe something missing in the dwarves that would make them more afraid of spirits than, let's say, even men might be?
That's a really, really interesting question. I was thinking while you and Erwin were talking that of all of the mortal peoples of Middle-earth, the dwarves are most rooted to earth, to rock, to stone.
To physicality. Yeah.
To physicality. And they're even made out of the earth, right? So for them, that idea of something existing outside of that must hold a strangeness that perhaps for the children of Iluvatar, it doesn't quite in the same way. That's what I was thinking when you two were talking anyway.
I like that. That's a very good way of thinking through that. This is, obviously this is one of those questions that is unanswerable in the most literal sense, of course, but it is a really fun one to sort of wrestle with, to think through. And it's really easy to answer the Legolas, and it's even sort of easy to answer about Aragorn. But yeah, distinguishing Gimli from one of the ordinary 30 Rangers, but like Erwin said, they're not ordinary. None of them are. These are all the Dunedain. These are all descended from Númenóreans. And that is not something to dismiss. These are not low men. These are high men. And these are really arguably the highest of the high men at this point. So, yeah, I know we would all be scared. I'm sure the hobbits would be terrified, even though, they're descended from men. Therefore, they are children of Iluvatar in the more literal sense, as opposed to the sense that the dwarves are. But I think maybe that comes back to what you said, Sara, about their being tied into the earth in so many ways. The hobbits are so close to the earth. And I don't mean that in the literal sense that just because they're short. I mean, because they're so very, they literally live in the earth. They dig holes in the ground for the most part. But, their love of gardening and all of these other things that are very tangible. They're not a bunch of philosophers and historians, and they work with what they can hold on to, very much like dwarves do. Mm. There may be something to be said about that sort of being tied to the earth in a way that makes you then a little more afraid of the incorporeal. Now, soon we're going to get back to more listener questions, but before we do, we want to remind you there is a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just us.
The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all our social media spaces. Check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
On Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast. Follow the page to get the news, but you're going to want to join the group to get in some great discussions.
And you'll definitely want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we're at Prancing Pony Pod. Now, conveniently enough, that's also how you will find us on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Twitch. And if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/Prancing Pony Pod.
And if you want daily Tolkien content, check out Today's Tolkien Times on the PPP YouTube channel and your favorite podcast apps. That's my short format daily show with everything from Middle-earth Map Mondays to Silmarillion Saturdays. And then there's my new twice weekly streaming of all fun things Middle-earth on the PPP Plays. Be sure to check both of those out on the YouTube channel for all the PPP productions at youtube.com/@PrancingPonyPod. All right, Sara, we got a lot more questions to go. So who's up next?
Okay, so next up is Nakat.
Nakat, welcome back.
Hello. So I'm going to dig some old bones.
Uh-oh.
Don't talk about Alan like that. What have I said? Honestly, rude. Wow. I'm sorry, I've sent the cat into hysterics.
It's just that I don't want to disrespect either of you. So
Sara does it all the time, so feel free.
Mm-hmm. Alan's used to it by now.
Right. I have been obsessed with Turin, I won't say at the age of 13 when I read him. When I read Silmarillion for the last time, I started to understand why my obsession with Turin was not that justified. But still, and I can see him for the jerk he is. But at the same time, I want to ask this question. We say that Melian was one of the wisest of Maiar. So Melian, Belig, Mablung, all of those favored Turin in many ways. They said they loved him. They went out of their way definitely Belloc to his death, in order to help Turin. And Melian broke her, rule of giving lembas only to elves. And he was the first mortal to get the lembas. And then he had the privilege of distributing it to other people as well. So why did he get this much favor of such wise and powerful people from Doriath?
Okay, that's a good question. Let's talk about the fostering of Turin by Thingol and in Doriath. What was the motivation for that? First, I want to touch on the Lembas thing. I've pulled up the Children of Hurin, the full version rather than the Silmarillion version. This, of course, I'm sure Melian knew that it was going to eventually go to Turin, but she'd actually given it to Beleg because for a moment, of course, Turin wants nothing to do with it, right? He says, the helm of my fathers I take with goodwill for your keeping, said Turin, but I will not receive gifts out of Doriath. This is like teenage angst Turin, who wants nothing to do with his parents. Beleg's like, well, then send back your sword and your arms. Send back also the teaching and the fostering of your youth, and let your men, who you say have been faithful, die in the desert to please your mood. Nonetheless, this waybread was a gift not to you, but to me, and I may do with it as I will. Eat it not if it sticks in your throat, but others may be more hungry and less proud. And Turin, that breaks Turin, and he's like, all right, I get you. I wondered that you deigned to come back to such a churl. So, Turin does have that special relationship with Beleg. Beleg's able to kind of call him to count on this. But let's talk about that fostering in Doriath and the fact that you're right. He gets so much really favor from everybody in Doriath, with the exception of what's his name that he runs naked off the cliff, Cyros. Not that he necessarily deserved anything less, but yeah, the fostering. Why was that such a thing?
I think it has to go back to Hurin, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It has to go back to Hurin and the great respect that even elves as great as Thingol and Melian would, of course, Melian and Maya, not just elf, would have for Hurin. Yep. Mr. Arien Toluva, he was part of that great battle. He was one of the reasons why so many of the elves actually survived, the ones that did. Part of that is to do with Hurin. He sacrificed himself. And I think that gained a whole lot of goodwill amongst the greater elves. So I think, without knowing Turin, because they didn't know him until he was sent there, it's to do with Hurin.
And very young, too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's an element also of just genuine sympathy for this young boy who shows so much spirit, so much strength at such a young age. I mean, when Beleg asks, what boon would you have of King Thingol? He says, I would be one of his knights to ride against Morgoth and avenge my father. This is like a little kid still.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely amazing that he ends up being adopted in. And I'm looking at the novel version, which I love because it's so much richer, so much fuller. Beleg explains to him that, you have the makings of a valiant man, worthy to be a son of Hurin the Steadfast, if that were possible. You realize just how much respect they have for Hurin, as you said. And even the narrative tells us the name of Hurin was held in honor in all the lands of the elves. But when he gets there, listen, this is just, again, I'm touched by this. He comes to the Great Bridge. He passes the gates into Thingol's hall. As a child, he gazed upon the marvels of Menegroth, which no mortal man before had seen, save Beren only. And I think I want to come back to that because I think Beren plays a small role in this too. Not even a small role. But Gethron spoke the message of Morrow before Thingol and Melian. Thingol received them kindly, set Turin upon his knee in honor of Hurin, mightiest of men, and of Beren his kinsman. And those that saw this marveled, for it was a sign that Thingol took Turin as his foster son. That was not at that time done by kings, nor ever again by Elflord to a man. And Thingol said to him, this is Thingol, a guy that I'm pretty hard on because he doesn't listen to Melian. He's pretty egotistical. He's condescending to the dwarves. He's flat out just wrong with Beren. I mean, he's trying to get him killed, but still honoring the promise that he made to his daughter. Totally different guy here. He says, "Here, son of Hurin, shall your home be, and in all your life you shall be held as my son, man though you be. Wisdom shall be given you beyond the measure of mortal men, and the weapons of the elves shall be set in your hands. Dwell now here in love." I think Thingol's also got a lot of guilt about how he treated Beren.
And so he should.
Thank you. Yes, and so he should. And I feel like this is his chance to do it right. This is a combination of deep respect for Hurin and the remorse that he has for how poorly he treated Beren. But it's absolutely beautiful, and I love what they do for him. And I think it just, to be honest, makes his story all the more tragic because he was deeply loved. This wasn't a guy who had to make these choices. Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Nakat, you wanted to follow up.
One, he did not have any other daughter, so there was that fear gone. At the same time, I feel that there was something about Turin that they respected. He could gather a lot of respect from other people, including the moment when he died. Mablung said this thing that, "Due to my words, I have killed the person whom I loved." He was no Fëanor to begin with. It was not just his father whom he loved. Right. So I feel that there is some honor in Turin himself also.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there is.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yes.
100%. I mean, he may have made some poor choices, but I want to be really clear. I may see him as having made poor choices, but he's not a villain like Fëanor or like Eol, or certainly not like a Maeglin. This is just a guy who should have made better decisions and whose life would have gone better had he made those better decisions, and not just his life.
But he was under a curse. Let's not forget, he's under a curse.
He was. It's true.
And, we can have that fate versus free will debate for the entire night, can't we?
We sure could.
Yeah.
And how much of that covered him when he was in Doriath, because in theory there he shouldn't have been able to make those. He wouldn't have been under the effects of the curse. But yeah.
Yeah, but he's still counted among the great.
Yes, for
he
good
is
reason.
Named by Elrond at the Council of Elrond.
As one of the elf friends, yes. I love that.
Exactly. So, he's, even though his choices were on occasions less than stellar.
Oh, yeah.
He is still renowned. Yeah. And his name is carried all the way down the ages by Elrond.
For good reason. Yes.
Yes.
And to the point that Tolkien even has in the unpublished Dagor-Dagorath, right, the battle at the end of all time, it is Turin who is said to slay Morgoth. So clearly Tolkien had, a degree of respect for Turin himself. Like, he didn't hold him as a bad person. He held him as a good person who made bad choices. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Great question, though. Really great question. All right, Sara. Who do we have up next?
We have Sara.
Sara, welcome back.
Hello, everyone. It is lovely to be here. I love hanging out with all my prancing pony people. So this question is going to bring us back into the time frame of The Lord of the Rings. I'm doing my first eyeball read-through of Lord of the Rings in quite some time. And I came across a sentence or a scene in Fog on the Barrow Downs, which I hadn't ever really questioned before. So it's after Merry has had his experience of feeling like he's been shot through the heart. I expect Alan to break into song now.
Well, you're to blame.
Wow, well played, Sara.
Thank you. Thank you.
After that, as Tom is spreading out the things that have been inside the barrow on the hillside, so that they could get sunshine and light and become less evil, he picks up a brooch with blue stones, and he says, "Here's a pretty toy for Tom and his lady. Fair was she who long ago wore this on her shoulder. Goldberry shall wear it now, and we will not forget her." So my question is, I don't think we know who she was. And if so, you can tell me. If not, do you have any headcanon, or do you want to speculate on who this woman was that Tom remembers?
Oh my. I do like that question. We don't know who it was, but clearly Tom does. And I think that's the thing we're supposed to take away from this, is that Tom's memory goes back with incredible clarity. I mean, the fact that he can recall who it was that wore this all the way back in the time of the kingdom of Arnor, or by this point, just the remnant kingdom of Arthedain. Wow. Going back a couple thousand years, and he's able to remember who it was. Do we have a headcanon on this? Do you have one? It's a beautiful moment, but I've never really put any thought into it. I wonder who this woman was.
Well, for each of the hobbits, he chose a dagger. Where did these daggers come from? Where were they made? We're going back a very, very long time here, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
Who were those who were able to smithy such daggers? What does Merry do with the dagger that he has? Right?
Yeah.
So where did these daggers come from? Now, I don't know that they are daggers of Gondolin in the same way that Sting and Gandalf's sword are, but they're obviously of extremely old making. But they must have some power of their own. Otherwise, Merry would not have been able to stab the Witch King with it.
Well, they're at least Númenorian, right? Well, made by the men of Númenor. They might be made by the men of Númenor in exile, right? I mean, Tom tells them specifically that they're blades forged many long years ago by men of Westernesse, and that they were, of course, the foes of the Witch King. The Witch King was the one who was crushing them in those three splintered kingdoms from Arnor. And those blades are, so it's going to be a woman of Westernesse.
Exactly. That's what I was wheeling all the way round to. This must be
took a shortcut.
I know. Well, I just took the long cut because why not? This must be a lady of Westernesse. One of the ladies that possibly one of the ones who came from Númenor out of the West to escape. Yeah. One of the originals, maybe, if it's that long ago. Certainly, if it is, a brooch of importance that Tom remembers, it could well be some kind of heirloom that even came from Númenor.
Very well.
So that's my kind of headcanon there, that it's so recognizable to Tom.
Yeah.
That, if he'd seen it once at a cocktail party 3,000 years ago, it's unlikely he would remember it. But maybe it's a brooch that he's seen because it is something that was an heirloom of that family. And so it was significant. I don't know.
Fits. I like that. I like that a lot because we think about all the things that did come from Númenor that the faithful were able to bring with them into exile, whether it be the Elendilmere or any of the other things that they were able to bring back from Anadune. I was trying to think of all the various names of Númenor. There's so many. It's wonderful. Andor, the land of gift, and so many. But yeah, I like the idea that this actually goes all the way back to a time where he may not remember it from Númenor because he was never in Númenor, as far as we know. A woman of Westernesse wearing it, having descended in her family. I love that. I think that's a beautiful idea. And I wonder if it's in some way perhaps related to the Prince of Cardolan who Merry felt, was stabbed through the heart, could very well be connected to that. I love the idea.
I love the bit on the next page where Tom says, "Few now remember them, yet still some go wandering, sons of forgotten kings, walking in loneliness, guarding from evil things, folks that are heedless." And of course there he's talking about the Rangers.
Yeah.
But then
100%.
the hobbits get a vision.
Yes.
It says, a vision, as it were, of a great expanse of years behind them, like a vast shadowy plain over which there strode shapes of men, tall and grim with bright swords, and last came one with a star on his brow.
They literally got a vision of Aragorn before they met Strider. And it's a tremendous vision. I love it. And I love that Tom's words have the ability to put that vision in their minds. What a gift that Tom has to do that. I love that. That really, if there's one thing that I know, and this isn't a gripe, this is more of a, I wish they could have. I missed that we didn't get this in the Jackson films. The whole Barrow Down sequence, first of all, because Jackson would have done such a fantastic job of creating a terrifying scene with
really
Barrow
creepy.
Light.
Yes, it would have been good.
But also just to get the history behind the swords. And to see, even to see perhaps this vision through the eyes of the hobbits. But then you'd have to have 6 or 8 movies to do it the way I want to do it. So,
Okay.
I know I got no problem with that.
All right.
Yeah, I'm fine. If they want to make some more, they could go back and do like a film of just the Barrow Downs, and then they could do like a 2-film series on the Scouring of the Shire, and I'd be perfectly happy.
Mm-hmm. That's around the time that they would make The Children of Húrin the film.
Oh, don't let me dream that. The
Right?
R-rated
Wouldn't that be
Tolkien
amazing?
adaptation. The NC-17 rated Tolkien adaptation.
Oh boy, yes.
I mean, man, talk about some warnings. This is not The Hobbit. This is not your grandfather's Middle Earth story. Oh, great question. Absolutely love that callback to the idea of an heirloom from Numenor.
And what a lovely little thing to pick out. Just a little throwaway moment.
It really
easily
is.
forgotten. That is gorgeous.
It's another one of those things that Tolkien adds that gives us that sense of history. And those are the things that make me feel this world is so real, because it has a history. It's, in a way, a textual ruin, as Dr. Drought might call it, right? The idea of, here's this clue. We're not going to tell you anything about this thing. We're not going to tell you who wore it. We're not going to tell you when it came into existence. But its mere presence at this point in the story tells you there is a history here. Mm-hmm. And it is old.
And Tolkien keeps doing this.
Over
and we
and
have
over.
to remember that when The Lord of the Rings was published, nobody except, mostly him, had even seen the Silmarillion. So, you get Aragorn singing a little bit of the tale of Beren and Luthien.
Oh, yes.
And they just leave it there.
I know.
And we don't know anything. And like I said earlier, Elrond saying, and Turin. And we're all like, well, who the heck is Turin?
Right. It was like when we learn about the blades made in Gondolin in The Hobbit. It's like the first of the real textual ruins, and you're like, "What Gondolin? The Goblin Wars? What are you talking about?"
Westerness? What's this now?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, let's take it forward to Shelob, the last child of Ungoliant, to trouble this
Of who
unhappy
now?
world.
Yeah.
Ungoliant who?
Yeah, exactly.
Just keeps dropping these little things in there, but never tells us anything about that. And we don't learn anything about that until we finally get Silmarillion, which is 20 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite, and I'm sure there are dozens of people, okay, maybe 3 people around the entire world, who are now waiting for Alan to say the obvious, which is, I love that Theoden is compared to Orome as he's charging the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, like Orome in his wrath. And I get chills, but that's because I've read the Silmarillion. I know who Orome is. But yeah, you read that in 1956 and like, who now? And
you just have to accept that this is a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And that every single one of these clues opens up more. And then you look at one of those and that opens up more. Tolkien could only go so far in a practical sense, but he also chooses to only go so far because he likes to leave those vistas unexplored. Yeah. Man.
Glorious.
Absolutely. All right, Sara, who is next up?
Okay, we now have David.
David, welcome.
Hey, glad to be here. And I'll kind of pick up on Sarah's point, but it was a small, brooch from history and what was its impact, or what was the meaning here. But I want to go back to the big picture. We've got 3,000 years of the Third Age, but before that we had 3 millennia or more of the Second Age. Aside from the fall of Numenor and the forging of the rings, what were the Second Age events that really had the most impact on the Third Age?
Ooh, that had the most impact on the Third Age. Yeah, I mean, obviously you hit the biggest ones.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks for taking away our thunder. Really appreciate that. No, I mean, I think it's not just the downfall of Numenor, it's the establishment of Numenor, right? I mean, that's created at the very beginning of the Second Age, and its establishment and the sort of setting aside or setting apart of the Edain, the 3 houses of the Edain, is really, really significant, because that ends up being the driving factor for the sort of the ascent of man and the descent of elves that we see in the Fourth Age, right? I mean, it's those men are the ones that will lead the world of men into the future. So I would say maybe the establishment of Numenor.
The creation of the ring wraiths is pretty important.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know that's, secondary or consequential to the creation of the Rings of Power, but that is very significant because you've created these beings that are now, extraordinarily powerful, wielding, incredible influence in Middle-earth on Sauron's behalf for thousands of years. There are some things that I think are significant in the history of Numenor before its fall that impact the Third Age. I'm trying to think maybe about their impact on the Third Age, but mostly the alliance that starts to develop between men and elves that then finds its full fruit in the Last Alliance. I think if we don't have Aldarion establishing an alliance with Gil-galad in the middle of the Second Age, I'm not sure that there's a strong enough alliance with the elves for them to all unite and create the Last Alliance itself. Though, again, that's also Second Age, the Last Alliance, but its presence obviously is the driving factor of the Third Age. And while we're thinking of other things that perhaps were influential in the Second Age, Olivia, you've got something you want to throw in there.
To me, very important, the quartet. So basically the whole Numenor invades and starts to bring essentially first trade, but then unfortunately terror to the men of the south, who then become much more inclined to go back to Sauron.
That's a very good point. I mean, the hostility that Gondor faces with Umbar dates way back to the Second Age and the sort of imperial expansionism stage of Numenor. That definitely impacts Third Age and even Fourth to that end. Yeah, most of the things that I'm thinking of are all related to the men of Numenor doing things in the Second Age.
Yeah.
That,
like the colonialism that actually creates all sorts of problems. Another one I want to mention is the establishment of Eregion.
Yeah, the establishment of Eregion is significant. I mean, this is the first purely Noldoran establishment, a Noldoran kingdom in Middle-earth. I'm trying to think of some others. So many things have to do with Numenor, though.
Yes. I mean, it's pretty central to what we have. Because here's the thing, we have so little actually written of the Second Age. And the things that were written were what Tolkien thought were the main things that were going to happen.
Right.
Like the creation of the Rings of Power and the story of Numenor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. That's a good point. I mean, the Second Age does revolve around those things. So over in chat, Nakat mentions another significant moment, and I think she's right. And it's when the Númenórean authority did not go to the eldest child when it was Silmarin, and she ended up becoming her son, who was the first of the lords of the end of, now I'm drawing a blank. Lords of Andunier, right?
Lords of Andunier.
Yeah. So, and of course it was from her that the faithful were descended. Elendil draws his descent from her. But she was skipped over for being the ruling queen. And it wasn't until Aldarion and Arendis' daughter, Ancalame, when Aldarion changed the law of succession to enable Ancalame to be a ruling queen. That's a significant moment for a number of reasons, one of which comes to mind, which is way later, at near the very end of the time of the kings of Gondor, when the last king of Arthedain, Arvedwi, claims the throne of Gondor and says, guys, I need to be the king, right? You don't have any surviving kings in the line. And you don't want to give it to this Eärnil character because he's, not, you need to give it to me. I'm the king.
He was claiming it through his wife, wasn't he?
He was claiming it on two grounds, right? Part of it through his wife, who was the daughter of Ondaher, the last king who had died, along with his sons, Artemir and Faramir.
Did like to reuse those names.
Yeah, no. And this is where I go on and decide and say, like, Faramir pulled an Eowyn, but wasn't as successful. He went off in disguise to war and just got himself killed. So instead of staying in Minas Tirith, where he would have been king, that ended that line, and there were no other descendants. And so Arvedwi's like, hey, I am descended from Isildur, right? And so I am legitimately the king of Gondor, but also I am married to the daughter of Ondaher, and through her I can also claim this kingship. And Gondor says no. But what's key in all of that is that there is an argument made that the kings of Numenor allowed there to be queens, that the lines could be descended through the queens. And Gondor was, nope, we only do it through the male line reckoning. And that was really an interesting thing. Like Gondor, when did they make that decision to abandon what had been the Númenórean tradition for several hundred years before its downfall? That is a very significant moment for sure.
And I'd like to mention her name because we haven't mentioned Firiel. Arvedui's wife was called Firiel.
Yes, Firiel. Yes. And of course, that was also the name that Miriel became known as after she, I believe that's she who died. That means mortal woman, Firiel, if I remember correctly. Yeah, she had only married Arvedui maybe 30 years before. So it was really interesting that, here he is claiming the kingship. Arguably a valid claim, but, the stewards had long decided they were never going to accept a claim from a descendant of Isildur, ever. They were like, we're not going to do that. So thence we have the problem, and we get Eärnil, and then we get Eärnur, who is, or did I just get those two reversed, Sara? Is it Eärnur? No, it was Eärnil was the one who became the king, and then his son Eärnur was the one who went off.
Eärnur is the doofus who went off thinking he could single-handedly take down, yes.
Yeah. Nobody calls me chicken, and then he goes off and proves that he's a total
He was
idiot.
a dead chicken, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, chicken with his head cut off, quite literally. All right, that was a good one. And yeah, I think there are probably other elements that I'm thinking of, but I think you said like the foundation of Eregion, the creation of the rings, which was included in David's question, the creation of the ring wraiths from those rings. How about the establishment of Rivendell? Probably one last one. Because that is sort of the after effects of Eregion. Imladris is founded by Elrond and becomes really the central repository of all elven knowledge in the Third Age. So, all right. Who do we have up next, Sara?
We have Andrea.
Andrea, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I have a question that dovetails nicely from David's question. And since this is my first Questions After Nightfall, I decided to ask ChatGPT to provide me with a good question for this discussion.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, no. The AI makes its first appearance on the PPP.
So here's what it came up with. Okay. Tolkien was meticulous about the passage of time and the cycles of history in The Lord of the Rings. Given that Middle-earth has seen multiple ages of rise and decline, do you think the events of the War of the Ring represent a true breaking of this cycle, or is it just another turning of the wheel? How might the Fourth Age have unfolded based on these patterns, and who would be the villain of the Fourth Age?
Ooh.
Okay.
Curse you, ChatGPT. That's actually a really good question.
Yeah, I would say that's not a terrible question. And I'll start by saying that it's part of the cycle. Because,
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be part of the cycle because, after all, it is referred to as fighting the long defeat, right? The battle of good against evil is always ongoing, and there will be moments where one overcomes the other, and then it all continues. It just carries on because that is exactly how things work. A balance must be maintained. Evil can never be fully eradicated from the world.
Correct.
They win a good moment in the destruction of the ring. It certainly sets back the evil in the world, if you like, quite significantly, because it's the undoing of Sauron. I'm not going to call it the death of. It's a different thing. It's the undoing of Sauron and the removal of his ring of power from the chessboard. So this is... It's a good moment for the side of good, but it's all part of the cycle. If you look all the way back through the First Age, there have been those cycles in which there have been wins and losses all the way through. This is a win. There will be more wins and more losses as we go, even into the Fourth Age.
100%. And I can say that not only because I believe that, that's just the nature of the world that Tolkien created. It's because of Tolkien's own words. And for this, I'm actually going to go to his letters. Letter 211, he's writing to Rona Bear, and he's talking about history and trying to fit this into real history and things along those lines. But what really intrigues me here is a footnote when he's talking about, he says, I doubt if there would have been much gain talking about writing things with greater verisimilitude. And I hope the evidently long but undefined gap in time between the fall of Barad-dûr and our days is sufficient for literary credibility. But it's the footnote to that because he says, I imagine the gap to be about 6,000 years. That is, we are now at the end of the Fifth Age if the ages were of about the same length as the Second and Third Age. But they have, I think, quickened, and I imagine we are actually at the end of the Sixth Age or in the Seventh. And that's an interesting question, because then you have to ask yourself, all right, if the fall of Sauron is the end of the third, and then we're in the seventh, what are the ends of the fourth, fifth, and sixth ages? Given that he's writing this letter post World War II, I'm almost thinking maybe that's the end of the sixth age.
Mm-hmm.
But then we've got the end of the fourth and end of the fifth. Where are we in history? It's an interesting question. I don't have the answer to that, but definitely the continuing of the cycle. I go back to another letter of his. In letter 256, he's talking about the sequel that he started writing to The Lord of the Rings called The New Shadow. And he gave it up really quick. If you've ever read it, you're like, wow, there's not much to this story. And that's because he says the story proved both sinister and depressing.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. He says it is inevitable, because we're writing about men. It is inevitable that we should be concerned with the most regrettable feature of their nature, their quick and I don't know how to satiety. I know the word he's talking about. Satiety, right? I mean, when one is satiated, one is satisfied. They're quick,
sated.
Yeah, he's sated. They are quickly sated with good. And he says that the peace and justice brought by Aragorn's reign would end up simply leading the people of Gondor to become discontented and restless. That is our nature, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
In a time of peace and time of plenty, things are good. We become discontented and restless. And even in that story, we start to get an idea of who the next villain is. He talks about how early on there was this outcrop of revolutionary plots, a center of secret satanistic religion. I mean, it's already going very, very poorly indeed. And this is just, still in the reign of Aragorn Elessar. Yeah, it's definitely a continuation of the cycle.
Yep. I completely agree with that. And yet, like you, Alan, if we're going with the number of thousands of years that each age seems to be, I mean, we're going still well into prehistory for the end of the fourth age, end of the fifth age. So the other part of your question, Andrea, was who would be the big bad in the fourth age? And that's a really interesting idea, because who knows? If the blue wizards went east and went bad, maybe they come back and start creating mayhem. Who knows? Mm-hmm. We'll probably get some of that in the Rings of Power. But there isn't really left at this point a figure like Sauron.
No.
I mean, Saruman is gone, and he was less than Sauron anyway.
And Sauron himself was less than Melkor, or
exactly.
Morgoth, so.
And Melkor is beyond the bounds of this earth in some nice Tulkas bound chains. So who would be the big bad? The thing is, what Tolkien was always concerned with was human nature, and that within human nature we have our own kind of big bad always lurking within us. Mm-hmm. He points that out in, I can't remember the number of the letter, when he's talking about Nazis and what's going on in the Second World War and how horrific it is. Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, you can't just, as somebody in a newspaper was suggesting, go and kill every single German person, because that is not how you deal with things like this. And there is no right to do that. Mm-hmm. And he uses that, there is no right to do that. But I think he might be concerned that the big bad would be us.
Yeah, I think absolutely so. And folks, that quote that Sara was thinking of it's actually really worth looking at directly, because it's so important. It's in letter 96, and this is a letter written to Christopher Tolkien in 1945, and he's talking about how he's just heard the news about Russians, closing in on Berlin, and perhaps the end of the war is on its way. Yet people gloat to hear of the endless lines, 40 miles long, of miserable refugees, women and children pouring west, dying on the way. There seem no bowels of mercy or compassion, no imagination left in this dark, diabolic hour. By which I do not mean that it may not all, in the present situation, mainly, not solely, created by Germany, be necessary and inevitable, but why gloat? We were supposed to have reached a stage of civilization in which it might still be necessary to execute a criminal, but not to gloat or to hang his wife and child by him while the orc crowd hooted. The destruction of Germany, be it 100 times merited, is one of the most appalling world catastrophes. He's not wrong. And
He's not wrong.
That reflection on human nature is deeply troubling, and as much applicable today as it was then. Heartbreaking.
Yes.
Like he says, we should have reached that stage of civilization, yet we have clearly not. And, I think he realizes we're never going to, which is why this is just another turn of the cycle.
And thank you for bringing up the correct letter. I could remember the contents, but couldn't remember the name.
I couldn't either. But while you were talking about it, I went into into my electronic copy and started looking for it. I'm like, well, I know he talks about like the German people, or he talks about refugees, and so I'm like typing, trying to find my word search. So there it is, letter 96. Yeah, his letters to his kids in particular were, I think, deeply revealing of those things.
They really are.
Yeah.
Yes. It tells us a lot about who he was as a person, what he actually believed in.
Yeah.
And they are really revelatory to us.
Yeah. Deeply personal. Sometimes I feel like it's a cheat code. Like am I supposed to know him this well? Because it's so revelatory. But man, good stuff. All right. Sarah, I think we've got at least one more here in the first round, right?
We do. It is, well, he's been waiting so patiently. It's Erwin.
Erwin, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. I have an idea in my head, or let's say an idea for a paper. So this is more like a pitch. So I became more and more intrigued by the person himself, and especially the moment that he is creating his art. The result is well documented, the genius of his creation. The volume of work that he had to go through to come to that point. I believe he was a savant. The amount of work, the things he did simultaneously, being a good father, being a professor, which is all in itself more than enough for most persons, but he did so much more in painting, in poetry, in writing, in creating the legendarian. How could he make this work in real life? I've come to the conclusion that in an act of unnecessary self-depreciation or even creation, he believes himself to be then Gollum. And the Lord of the Rings is his ring, and uses, let's say, his earlier legendarium to create salvation for himself. That he needed the earlier Silmarillion to validate the time and effort he spent on the Lord of the Rings, because it was such a process. My point is, I believe there is some rich soil for a paper. That Gollum, not per se on purpose, but the struggle he had with creating the Lord of the Rings translated into the extraordinary development of the personality of Dan Gollum, who was in the beginning only a scary little creature under a mountain.
Yeah, it's true. Certainly version 1 of The Hobbit, he was just a dude, just a creepy, scary dude living in a cave at the bottom of the mountain.
Yeah.
That is an interesting question. I'm going to defer to Sara, and by that I mean I have no idea what to say, so I'm going to ask my co-host to see what her opinion might be.
Okay, well, I have a couple of thoughts. My first thought is to discuss what you were saying about where did Tolkien find the time? Because he had 4 children and a job and he was writing. I'll tell you where he found a lot of the time, which is where a lot of men of that age and that time found the time. He had a wife at home who took care of the kids and looked after the house and cooked all the meals and did all the cleaning and all the washing. And that is how men of that time found the time. Let's face it, without the woman in the house who was actually doing the childcare, he would not have had the time. So let's acknowledge the woman behind the scenes without whom Tolkien would never have had the time. I think that's quite important.
That is a very excellent point.
Secondly, to your point about Gollum, and I agree with you that Gollum is a fascinating character.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I think Tolkien develops Gollum so well is because of what Gollum represents. He is the ultimate in ambiguity and liminality caught within one poor little creature. He is at all times neither truly good nor truly bad. He's caught between both. He is, I'm not going to say he's a lovely person. He isn't. He clearly isn't. He doesn't start out well, but he is instantly taken over by the ring because the ring exploits weaknesses, and it found Smeagol's weaknesses instantly because there were so many of them. But he always has, right up to the last moment, there is a possibility for redemption. It's right there. He is where he is because, if we read the story this way, of providence. Everything Gollum does is him proving but mine instrument in the end. He is a poor creature for whom we should feel pity because he is caught, he is trapped, his life is a misery. even though when he did have the ring, his life was a misery, he still believes that if he had the ring, he would be the Gollum the Great, eat fish every day. And it's never, ever going to be true because the ring promises everything and delivers nothing. So I think one of the reasons why he's so well developed is because Tolkien was most interested in borderlines. He was most interested in the liminal, in the spaces that neither are nor are not. That's why we have so many underground spaces. That's why we have Lothlorien. That's why we have so many things within the world of Middle-earth that are liminal, that hover over borders. And Gollum is the ultimate in hovering over a border. Tolkien was fascinated by that. Because I think one of the things we can say about Tolkien is he really did quite well understand human nature, and that as humans, we're neither wholly good nor wholly bad, but often it's our choices that lead us on the path to what actually becomes of us. And it is all about choices. As to your question about whether this is fertile ground, I think there's always fertile ground in looking at a character like Gollum. I would always hesitate about putting equal signs between Tolkien and a character, simply because we don't actually know enough about Tolkien to do something like that. We can never know enough about somebody who lived, who died like 50 years ago. Because we weren't there, we didn't know him, we didn't meet him, we didn't know him as his family did, or as his children did, as his friends did. And even your friends don't know you well enough to say, this is the character that you are most like. They can make a guess at it, but they can't always be right. But on the other hand, if you're asking the question, and it's a great question, why did Tolkien develop Gollum so well? That's a good question to go for, because that then allows you to look at what we know about Tolkien from his letters, from his poetry, from his other writings outside of Middle-earth. That leads you to then look at why such a borderline creature as Gollum becomes so important. So those are my immediate thoughts on what you had to say. Back to you, Alan.
Those are such amazing thoughts. I don't really have a lot to add. And I'm not saying that because I'm like, well, now I don't have to do anything. That was really fantastic. That was deeply insightful on, like you said, comparing and saying, well, you're most like this character, most like that. But asking the question in the way of why did he develop Gollum with such complexity and such depth when, again, maybe it's not that the other characters are simplistic, but it's that Gollum is richly complex and a very difficult character to decipher. I like what you said though about the redemption. I know Tolkien himself was asked about speculating about what if Gollum had remained faithful to Frodo instead of trying to get him killed by Shelob. And at the end of the day, Gollum would have likely tossed himself into the fire with the ring anyway, but willingly. And it's just this idea that, like you said, Spibimi shall prove but mine instrument. Gollum was there as an instrument of that fate. But all the way to the end, he had that chance all the way. And as so many characters in Tolkien do. That's another recurring theme, is the idea of there always is a chance to repent and to turn around, to do it differently. I like the idea of a paper on that. I would read that paper. I would go to that talk at Oxamute,
100%.
Drawing connections.
It is more, where to start and where do you want to end? Because that's the thing with the paper, what do you want to convey? And this is in my mind for a couple of years now, and this was somehow the perfect moment to at least, plant a seed.
Yeah.
So to say.
Well, I'm glad that you did.
The place to start, if you don't mind a little bit of advice, because unsolicited advice is incredibly irritating, but if you don't mind a little bit of advice,
very happy with it.
The place to start is with a question. What is the question you're asking?
Right.
And if you start there, then that will lead you to your main thought that will carry you through your paper and end up in your conclusion. Because once you have the idea of what question am I actually asking, then you know what you're looking for in the text to help you to answer that question. So I always try and start with a question. It usually ends up being about 20 questions by the time I've written a whole load of notes, but start with, one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Thanks so much.
All right. No problem. Thank you, Erwin.
That's okay. I'll send my bill for the advice later.
$1.73.
It'll cost you an entire Jameson's with ice at Oxenmoot. How's that?
Ah, there we go. Good deal. That's a win.
I'm cheap.
Well, folks, we'll come right back after the break with a few more questions. Folks, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting the PPP by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. It's what gives me the ability to work on making this show better every year. When you join, you get the best Discord community around, and that includes live episode recordings, hangouts every month. You can also get episode postscripts, ad-free episodes, free merch, and more.
You can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
And you can always help us out by giving us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify. And please recommend us to your friends. Sarah, we've got time for a few questions. It's going to depend on how complicated they are. But let's go ahead and see who still has questions for our second round.
Okay, Sarah's first.
Mine is just a short, sweet, simple one. I've been talking to people about starting to read Lord of the Rings, and I tell them, keep your dictionary beside you because you're going to come across words that you probably don't know. What is currently one of your favorite words that Tolkien introduced you to?
Confusticated bebothered.
I love that.
There are so many.
Oh, goodness.
So many. I've always liked the intricacies of the word doom in the way that Tolkien uses it. That's one, because it seems like you know what it means, but then you don't.
So we've got quite a few mentioned in the chat here. Andrea suggests Fae.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's really good. Ooh, and Gleed from May. Hot as a Gleed.
Mm-hmm.
The Ring, yes.
Yes.
The cat likes eucatastrophe, which is a great word. That is absolutely true.
Eucatastrophe is a great word that he coined. I love that. Taking that Greek prefix eu for good and adding it to catastrophe is just fantastic. Weregild is another one. We've actually, I'm trying to remember if that conversation has come out yet. There's a conversation we have with a guest. No, it has not come out yet, where we go even more in depth on the idea of Weregild. But Matt and I talked about that a number of times during our run through Rohan, because it actually came up a few times, including when I think it was King Folquina sent his twin sons to help fight, with Gondor, and they both died. And then, he was sent a great Weregild of gold for their deaths. Goodness. But yes, good advice, by the way, Sarah. Have your dictionary handy because, you will need it. You will definitely need it. And you'll need specialty dictionaries if you're going to do things like read some of his old poetry. The Lay of Lathian, which I've been reading through on today's Tolkien Times for, months now. My goodness, I can't tell you how many times I've had to look up okay, what is this archaic word? But it's fantastic. I love his made-up words too, though. His Elvish language words are fantastic.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, I know you love Quenya.
I do.
Quenya's your jam. I love Sindarin because it's so Welsh.
It is. That's fair. It's beautiful. They're both beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I just, for some reason, there's something about Galadriel's lament in Quenya that I just really enjoy reading. But yeah. If I go there, I'm going to pull up 1,000 words, right? I mean, if we go into Sindarin or Quenya or, even some of the other languages, Kuzdul and goodness, even some of the ones in the Black Speech are fun words. But let's stick with English. I suppose, would it be fair to say let's also include some Old English in there? Because some of the Rohirric words, we learn a lot about Old English through what we read and learn in Rohan. But yeah, oh goodness, so many words to choose from.
I mean, a word that just sings to me, which you'll find ironic when I tell you, is Ainulindale, which is, it just has such a beauty to it.
The rhythm word. And the musicality.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
It really is. Ainulindale. And that same root for singing that we find in Ainulindale, which is the music, is in the name Lindoranand, which was an early name for Lothlorien, and that's translated as Vale of the Land of the Singers. So I love how the roots in his words connect to everything. Mm-hmm. And if you know a little bit, you can decipher what this other made-up word means because you know those elements.
Yep. If you break down Ainu Lindale, you've got the Ainur at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. The creation, those who were of his thought, basically the angelic beings, and then it's the music of creation. It's fantastic. But yeah, English words alone, there's so many. Cot is a simple one that I didn't know what it meant in that context when the orcs are coming burning Rick, cot, and tree. Mm. And that a cot was, basically a small, simple home. Mm-hmm. There are all sorts of words like that. There's a couple of words when they talk about the Pelennor, Ostengarner. Those are the ones, Ostengarner, that Demay mentions in chat. Those come to mind. Yeah, just lots of wonderful archaic words, or even words that he's using an archaic meaning for. Like they may be words that we know today, but they're totally different than what he means it as. And I like figuring out, what did he actually mean? But yeah, fantastic. Great question, Sarah. Thank you for that one.
It was a lovely question.
And Sara, I think you said Erwin is up next in the second round.
Erwin is next,
after waiting so patiently before. What do you have for us this time?
Thank you so much. This is a much more easy question than before. Which are your favorite 3 Tolkien tribute books? These can change depending on new publications and shifting personal interests, etc. For myself, they are at the moment number 1, Flora of Middle Earth, number 2, Atlas of Middle Earth by Karen Wynne Fonstad, and number 3, Tolkien's Faith, which I just recently discovered, but I really, really enjoy. I'm not a Catholic or a religious person myself, but Tolkien's Faith by Holly Ordway is right up there for me. So for you, and then Sara, what are your 3 tribute books, so to say?
So are we talking about books about Tolkien, like
about Middle Earth, or like Verlin Vlieger, Splintered Light, which is
Splintered Light's going to be one of my
fantastic,
top 3.
Fantastic as well. Mm-hmm. So, your top 3.
I'll let you go first. Yeah, that's a good one, though. It's a great question.
Anything by Verlin Vlieger is going to take up the entirety of my top 3. So we're going to set Verlin to one side.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, well, one of the most useful that I've really, really enjoyed having my hands on, well, apart from anything by Wayne and Christina, of course.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I'm going to set them to one side as well, because actually they would fill my top 3 very, very quickly. But Robert Foster's Complete Guide is really good.
Yeah.
I very much enjoy having that because it's a handy resource. So that's something. Oh, I like John Rateliff's History of the Hobbit. That is very good. I've got a million up here on my bookshelf.
That's the thing. There's so many.
There are so many. I don't know how I would choose. I mean, if you're going to... All right, I'm going to choose my favorite work of scholarship about Tolkien. And that is the collection of essays called Perilous and Fair. Which is absolutely superb.
There are so many. If I set Vlieger aside, then I also have to set Garth and Shippey aside, because they're the other two for whom everything they touch seems to be golden. Whether it's Tolkien and the Great War, or The Worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien from Garth, or whether it's The Road to Middle Earth or Author of the Century from Tom Shippey, Splintered Light, Music Interrupted from Vlieger. So if I only get a top 3, and I've already named 6
aside.
Okay, I'm not going to set anybody aside. I'm going to say the 3 that I just find are totally indispensable. Wayne Hammond and Christina Scull's Reader's Companion to The Lord of the Rings. Absolutely indispensable.
It is, yeah.
Oh, there's so many. Okay, fine. I will set Vlieger aside. I will set Garth aside. I will set Shippey aside, because those 3 are for me just absolutely indispensable. I'm going to throw a new one in there because I was so challenged when I read it. I'm going to say Pity, Power, and Tolkien's Ring.
Tom Hillman.
From Tom Hillman, who is actually a frequent guest here at the Questions After Nightfall. That blew me away.
It's a great book. Yeah.
It really is.
So accessible as well.
It is. Yeah. It really reminds me a lot of Dr. Vlieger's writings. I mean, it really has that same tone and that same sort of here are 2 paragraphs that you're reading along and everything's okay. I see this. And then there's a concluding sentence and you're like, oh, where did that come from? And it's stunning in its like just jaw dropping observations.
It is. Yeah. And I'm just going to jump in here because Tom Hillman is the only other person who so far I can find who has picked up on Tolkien's one use of the word ring restlessness.
Oh, that's good.
And he did go into it in a lot of detail, but he picked up on it and he had something to say about it. And it was something that I wrote about when I was doing the Tolkien and psychology conference. But Tom really picked up on something that I feel was just a very, very subtle little thing that was, it was mentioned once in the history of Middle-earth, and that's it.
Wow. That is a deep cut. Okay. And then as much as I love Fonstad's Atlas, I kind of want that to be my third choice, but it really can't be. Oh, there's so many. I can't choose
That's
3.
the problem.
I can't choose 3. I'm going to say another Hammond and Skull, or Skull and Hammond in this case, creation, the 3-volume poetry set that just came out.
Oh, yeah.
Just, wow. Eye-opening again. So those would be my 3 for now. Those my 3 among 12 that I named. I'm a cheater. I absolutely did not stay within the confines of the question. Great question, though, and I hope that leads people to look into the vast array of books out there, whether they're reference books like The Complete Guide to Middle-earth or like the Atlas, whether they're biographies like Tolkien and the Great War, whether they're scholarly approaches, whether they're some of the amazing art books. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, we didn't even touch on that. I mean, Tolkien, Maker of Middle-earth, the book that the Bodleian put out from that exhibit, that's another fantastic resource. But there's so much. And folks, you just will never run out of books on that. So
no, the trouble was definitely picking a top 3.
Yeah, I can barely pick a top 10. All right, Sara, who do we have up next here in the second round?
Okay, well, thank you for that, Erwin. And next we have Nakat.
Nakat, welcome back again.
Okay, my question is a silly one this time. What would be Fëanor's favorite video game? Other than Candy
Grand
Crush.
Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto. I love that. Boy. Well, it's not going to be Call of Duty because he doesn't really have a sense of duty. Or obligation. Is there a game about somebody who loves their father and nobody else?
That's a weird story.
I know. Yeah. Yeah, Grand Theft Auto actually does come to mind. Grand Theft Swanboat is the long expected prequel to that. Yeah, I think that's a fair story. Yeah, for sure.
Olivia wants to add on to that.
Oh, yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of rankings here.
Minecraft.
Oh, Candy Crush, the dual version, says Nakat.
Yeah, Tetris. Anything that he can get the cheat codes to would also work for Fëanor. Yeah, any sort of crafting game, certainly.
Yeah, it's just my mind went straight to Alquilonde and the pinching of the boats. So.
I totally love that. Yeah. Come on, give me the boats. I got to go chase this guy. Yeah, you know what? Maybe you need to take a break and think before you chase this guy. I don't know. I'm taking your boats. I'm killing as many of your people as I needed to take your boats. And then I'm just going to burn your boats.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just because.
Exactly. That was one of the most just kind of heart-crushing lines when his son asks him, so who are we going to send back to go get the rest of our people with these stolen ships? Yeah, none and none, right? None and none. I know I'm the king of these people, but screw them all. Let them along. Let them walk. Oh, some king you are. All right. Mm-hmm. Wow. Grand Theft Auto. You win that one, Sara. Great.
Thank you. I will take that crown.
You should. All right. Who do we have up next?
Okay. Well, thank you for that fun question, Nakat. And next up, we have Demay.
Demay.
All right. I have here my backup question. And actually, this has been my backup question for a long time. So the ring must be delivered into the fires of Mount Doom, according to the Council of Elrond. Right. That was their great conclusion. Now, Elrond was the only person who'd been there before. The only one who knew the way. So why didn't he lead the fellowship? It's like, I heard the Glorfindel thing, like he's too sparkly, but why are you not going, dude?
Far too important.
Yeah, I can't go on this. This is why I have underlings. I am Lord Elrond. What part of Lord have you forgotten? I
can't sneak through the countryside unseen. I will be wearing royal purple and going through on my destrier.
I'm always glorious. I cannot hide. I mean, practically speaking, I assume it's because he knows what his strengths are, and perhaps he's no longer, he's aware that he's no longer really a martial leader. I mean, yes, he was capable of being in battle and being successful in battle. I mean, he was the banner bearer for Gil-galad. So, I mean, there's no doubt he was capable of these kinds of things, but that was 3,000 years ago. And since then, he's been a librarian. So, I mean, no disrespect meant to librarians, but I don't know that I want one of them leading the company into Mordor.
But also, if the quest to destroy the ring fails, then you're going to need some serious generals.
Yes, you do.
Left behind to try and sort out the mess that will ensue.
Yeah, exactly. This is a mission for captains, not generals, and he is a general, right? He's more of a strategic mind than a tactical mind, and taking a small unit of troops into the field. Plus, of course, as Nakat brings up in the text, if he does leave, does he take Vilya with him? If he does, that is a high risk gamble to have Vilya leave Rivendell and possibly be taken by Sauron.
And doesn't that leave Rivendell with a lot less protection?
Exactly. If he takes Vilya with him, then Rivendell is no longer protected. If he leaves Vilya behind, who's going to wield it with the power that Elrond can wield it in order to protect Rivendell while he's gone?
You could as well ask why Galadriel doesn't say, you know what, I'll join your company. Because after all, it was Galadriel who tore down Dol Guldur.
That is true. We know how strong she is.
Absolutely. Yeah. But is she going to leave Lothlorien and take Nenya with her?
And yet, Demay points out Gandalf had his ring with him. So there is a gamble there.
But Gandalf's stewardship was of the whole world, not of one specific place.
Yes.
Whereas if Galadriel had left Lothlorien and taken Nenya with her, that would leave Lothlorien unprotected.
Exactly. Dol Guldur takes Lothlorien in 3 moves. I mean, it's over.
Pretty much.
And I think that's the point, because both of their rings are tied directly to, or their use of those rings is tied directly to their kingdoms, to Rivendell and to Lothlorien. And of course I said kingdoms, but that's not what they are, to their realms. And either of them leave, then those realms become susceptible to the enemy, because either they take the ring with them and there's no protection, or there's nobody behind to wield the ring powerfully enough. Though one wonders, why doesn't she say, you know what, with Gandalf dead, why don't you take Celeborn with you?
Throw Celeborn under the bus.
I mean, he's not doing me a whole lot of good. I'll tell you what, I'll trade you Celeborn for Gimli.
Well, I tell you what, that reminds me of that wonderful bit in the tale of Galadriel and Celeborn from Unfinished Tales. Right, this is where Sauron is so great became his hold on the Myrdain that at length he persuaded them to revolt against Galadriel and Celeborn to seize power in Eregion, and that was at some time between 1350 and 1400 of the Second Age. Galadriel thereupon left Eregion, passed through Khazad-dûm to Lorinand, taking with her Amroth and Celebrian, but Celeborn would not enter the mansions of the dwarves, and he remained behind in Eregion, disregarded by Celebrimbor.
Yeah, disregarded by Celebrimbor.
He is just the pretty thing on Galadriel's arm.
And that was when Amroth was actually their son, as opposed to the king of Lorien. That's, boy, we're going to get into the history of Galadriel and Celeborn next season. And that is going to be a lot of fun to look at the various versions of that story. But yeah, I think that Elrond's choice to not go is one of protecting Rivendell, having a backup plan, knowing his strengths versus his weaknesses. I do think that if Merry and Pippin had not gone, I do think he would have considered sending Elladan and Elrohir. He talked about there may be some in my household that would be, good to send. I would not be shocked if those had been his choices had Merry and Pippin not been. But and they would have been pretty darn powerful to have along the way. But without those swords of Westernesse, the Witch King doesn't get what's coming to him.
Spabimmy.
Yeah. And it's all spitball, man. We I can't tell you how many times we've done these crazy questions that are just speculative, and you think, well, they're simple questions, but then they have crazy answers. Like, well, what if Gandalf actually died and wasn't resurrected? And all the things that are tied into that. You're like, oh man, the whole story. I mean, all these things change. And then and it doesn't even matter that any of those things change, because they're all hosed because Frodo never took off the ring on Amon Hen and Sauron got it in hours. Because there was nobody to say, take off the ring, you idiot. So I do love how all it takes is just pulling on one thread. Like, what if this, what if that, what if this? And it's so much fun. But that's a very good question. I will say it's very appropriate that was our last question for the day. So Demay opened us up and she gave us our last question. We are done, folks. That wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony podcast. But please be sure to join me and Sara again next week as we start our run in this season, getting back to the appendices to The Lord of the Rings for everybody's favorite rom-com, Aragorn and Arwen.
Did you forget the ending already to that tale?
Maybe I just have a morbid sense of humor. I don't know.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'm sure we will have things to say about the tale of Aragorn and Arwen when we get to it.
I'm hearing the capital T and the capital S, yes.
Good. I'm glad they came over. Okay. Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP, editor Jordan Runnels, Barliman Becca Davis, social media manager Casey Hilsey, event and Patreon community coordinator Katie McKenna, graphic artist Megan Collins, and website guru Phil Dean.
Please take a minute to check out the prancingponypodcast.com. That's where you'll find show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, and our online storefront where you can get PPP merch, including the all-new art from Megan.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony podcast is, after all, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link for it in our library. And we do get a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed we do. We also want to thank our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier, several of whom are here today. I'll start with Demay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Keith in Alabama, and Erica in Texas.
And there's also Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Anne in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, Joe in Maryland, Nathan in Arizona, and Kevin in Pennsylvania. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony podcast. Subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your really difficult questions to Sara. Send your easy ones to Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com.
Oh, thank you, Alan.
It's my faith in you.
If you want your voice literally heard, well, just send us audio of your question. Visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us. And please be sure to still email the question to Barliman, though.
That's right. Now, even though Barliman's been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
How far, Bob? Bye.